Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a pinion seal on a Toyota. The front and rear are pretty much the same seals. I'm just going to be doing the rear today on our 1986 Toyota 4Runner. I'll show you how to do the basic seal removal and replacement. I'll show you what you need. I also like to point out my awesome new shop light from Uberless Lights. Pretty nice light throw. What you're going to need is a oil drain, because it's probably going to leak unless you've let it leak long enough that it's not up at the pinion anymore, which is bad. Probably a pair of gloves, because gear oil smells fantastic. An impact with a 30mm socket. Of course, you'll need a replacement seal, and there is a difference in what you'll probably buy, so I need to show you that. You'll need a seal puller. You should use a brass drift. You probably don't have to, but to preserve the seal, it's a good idea. Dead blow hammer, 2 14mm wrenches, and a BFH, aka big friggin' hammer. And that is about it. I'm gonna go over the seal a little bit. The seal that we pull out will probably not look like this, and the seal you pull out will probably not look like this. Here's your part number. This is not an OE Toyota part. It's giving us an 86 vehicle. Wasn't too concerned about using Toyota like we normally do. This seal has an extra wiper on the front, or a seal. This will press into the backing plate of the actual pinion flange and kind of help to seal it up. It's very likely that the one you pull out will not have that, but don't be alarmed. You probably don't have the wrong seal, you just have an upgraded version. So here's the seal we'll be working on today. Obviously it's been leaking quite a while. You can see all the residue and it's stuck up on the gas tank and stuff. So this is where your 14mm wrenches are gonna come in. There's 4 of these bolts that go through. You can't really get a socket in there. I recommend a gear wrench, but just regular old school 14mm will do. Once we pull this off, there's a 30mm nut behind this, and the flange slides out, and we'll be able to see the seal that we're gonna be replacing. There's a little bit of slop in this one. We're not addressing that today. We're just gonna be doing the seal. All right, once we get the 4 driveline bolts out, I do want to point something out here. We're not doing it on this one, it's just worth pointing out. These nuts have lock washers on them. And typically, we just throw them back in, the same lock washers in there. But as you can see, this one's pretty well compressed. It doesn't cost much. It's worth just replacing those while you're in there. Now, I'm not practicing what I'm preaching. I'm not actually gonna do it on this one. But this vehicle has 400,000 miles on it. We just use it to go to the beach, so it's not a big deal. Once you get the bolts out, you're going to take a hammer. You can use a pry bar, but a hammer is relatively effective. And basically what you'll do is you'll just tap the joint on the casting part, and it'll kind of separate away from the flange, and it comes loose. Now, what I didn't tell you to do, but I actually do, is if you look up here, I usually keep a bungee cord around, because you can just let this hang, but there's not really a reason to just let it hang. So if you throw it on a bungee cord, you got about 1,000 things you can hook on here, and just hang it out of the way so it's not in your way. All right, here's where your 30mm socket comes in. These are 30mm front, rear, from the 60s clear on into even the current ones, I believe, even the little larger ones on the 2010 and newer Toyotas. So there's a little notch right here where you tap this in with a punch. It's basically like locking the washer in place so it doesn't back off while you're driving, which is clearly not a good thing. So you should be able to just put an impact on there, spin it off. It isn't gonna stop it from coming off. You'll just want to tap that back in when you put it back on. You don't have to have an impact to do this, but it's certainly going to help, because otherwise you have to have a way to hold the pinion from spinning while you pry on it. So we're just going to give this a hit with this impact. This should be relatively simple, and it was. So as you can see behind there, you have a little washer that's going to come off when I pull the flange. The flange generally doesn't just pop right off, but this one has enough play in it. I suspected it would, and we didn't even drip any fluid, because so far the fluid's low enough it isn't going to come out. Do not lose this washer, you will need it. And this is what you're left with. You'll notice this seal does not have the piece I was showing you on the other seal. So when you pop this off, you're going to possibly think you have the wrong seal. And all that piece is for is they've added, it's a new design. It comes and touches the back of this little dust protector here. And I'm assuming it's just to keep a tighter seal, or to keep debris from getting back in there and making the seal worse. Because what happens is this seal wears a notch on the shaft, and once that notch is worn, putting a new seal in can typically not help. So you want to keep as much debris out there as possible because it acts as sandpaper. The next step is going to be popping the seal out, which is generally not too fun of a job. You don't have to have a seal puller to do it. You can drive a screwdriver into the seal itself if you're careful and work the seal out. I'm going to use a seal puller because I have one here, and it'll work just about as good as a screwdriver. This is where you find out how lazy I've been. When I pop this out, if not much gear oil comes out, I've probably let it leak a little bit too long. Well, no gear oil came out, but let's just pretend I'm still a good guy. And that's it. That's the removal. From here on out, it's reversing what we do. It'll be putting the old seal back in, which I'm about to show you how to do. But it really is simple. This is not something you should take to a shop potentially and pay $150 for if you're mildly competent, have a few tools. Don't be scared to try this. Worst case scenario, you mess up a $7 seal and you try again. It's a pretty low risk project to do. And like I said, there's no reason not to do it on your own. Here's the two seals side by side. You can kind of see they're similar. This one has a little deeper push on the side where it goes in. I don't think that matters at all. You can see here, this is the part that actually seals and keeps the gear oil from coming out. It's got a little, see if I can actually pull it off and show you. A little spring goes around there. That's what actually keeps it pulled in. But again, it does wear a little notch around there, which does make it leak, and it can be a problem. So we're going to toss this seal, and we're going to put this seal in. And what I like to do is I just start it a little bit because you don't want to go in crooked, and I'll tap it. I do have a seal installer, but I'm doing this video for people who just want to work on this stuff in their driveway. And generally speaking, not everybody's going to have a seal installer kit, so I get it started with the dead blow. Now, if we had the original style steel, I could actually install it all the way at the dead blow, but I don't want to hit this wiper, even though it's not paramount to its sealing. There's no need in damaging it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brass drift, and I'm going to go ahead and work it the rest of the way in with this. I'll probably fast forward through this part because I do it slow. And what we're going for here is we want it all the way in and completely flush. You don't want it hanging out, which that is. So that is completely installed if you want to see how that sits in there. And while we're at it, I'm going to point this out here. You can see this groove. This is where the seal's been running. I don't know if the camera can pick that up very well, but it's the shiny spot around there. And even through my gloves, I can feel that spot. So, I mean, it's been wearing for working on 500,000 miles. So obviously it's going to have a little bit of a groove in there. Even if you do have a groove in this, these are not terribly expensive. They're about $65 online, new. It's not going to be a Toyota product. They make them aftermarket. So if you're worried about it or your groove's quite bad, you can just replace this piece, which is going to give you better seal. Typically though, you get an old seal that's worn, you put a new one in, it's going to be tight enough that even with a small groove like that, generally it is going to seal. So you probably don't have to have a concern unless you notice that notch is excessive. And I can't really tell you what excessive is because I don't have the mics out here to check the difference between the two, but I would suspect that's probably somewhere around 2 to 3 thousandths. And I personally think that's probably just fine. So what we're gonna do is, as you probably guessed, we're gonna slide this back on. We're gonna put our washer back in. It's quite thick. You can't do it without it. So, I mean, I guess you could. You shouldn't. That's what I should have said. You shouldn't. We're going to start this back on, and then we are going to hammer it back down with the impact. It's about 35 ugga-duggas on this, so we're just going to go down until it's, well, until I'm happy. Installed. That's about 34 ugga-duggas, but we're going to call it good enough. Now, as I pointed out when we started, there is a little notch in your pinion, and you take your brass drift or a hammer, which I'm just going to use the ball peen part of the hammer, and you really just tap that a little bit. As long as it bends in, it's going to keep this nut from backing off on its own. It just adds a little additional amount of friction to keep it from backing off, normal use, vibration, and whatnot. So I'm going to turn this where it's easy to hit. I don't know if it'll be easy to see, but I'll show you when I'm done. And all I've done is bent it slightly flat. That's enough to hold it. It isn't gonna back off there. It isn't gonna mess up the threads if I have to pull it back off and do a seal again because I was wrong about the groove being too big. So that's it. Your new seal's in. You didn't spend a fortune to get it in. Parts alone, the part that I showed you, like I said, is about $7. We ordered ours off Rock Auto. You can get them about 1.5 million places because Toyota has used this axle housing for so very long. They don't use it currently, but they have used it for so long that the parts are abundant, not expensive. Even if you buy, let's say I prefer Toyota or Timken, it only about doubles the price. Reassembly is exactly the same as this assembly, just, you know, not the same because it's the opposite. I've heard people argue that they like flipping these bolts around and running them the other way, but that doesn't really work with the dust shield on there, so I'm putting it back the way I got it off. And quite honestly, I don't even know why people do that. We'll probably fast forward through this part because putting a nut on is not the most interesting thing, but I'm just gonna keep plugging away. Enjoy the music. Just kidding, we don't upload music. Who wants to get sued? It is worth mentioning that I did put the transfer case and transmission in neutral before I lifted this up. And I also left the parking brake off intentionally. It isn't going to be as big a deal for you if you were doing this on the ground, but it makes it easier for me to get to all these nuts and bolts easy because I was wrong about the gear wrench. It doesn't fit on this flange with this style, so it's old school, just box wrenches. Now this flange actually has a little piece inside of there. As you can see, it's not pulled up against tight. It actually kind of sucks itself in, and that's why we hit it with a hammer. I seriously doubt the camera can pick it up. There's a little flange in there. It's probably roughly 16 inches long, and it'll kind of slide into the socket where we just put the nut. So if you see that it's not sucking up, well, it's not supposed to until you tighten it down, so don't worry yourself too awful much. I work my way around just to make it go in even. Because although we could probably force it in if it gets in a bind, why work harder? Now that they're almost done, these bolts actually do have a torque spec, which I will put, I don't know, I'll probably throw it in the video like somewhere up here somewhere, but the problem is you can't really get a torque wrench in here to torque these. So torque spec be damned. My calibrated hand says that's pretty well torqued. And effectively we're done. That is the new seal installed. Everything's buttoned back up. Clearly I have to add some gear oil to this, which is, I'll have to double check this. I may be wrong, but I do believe it is 7585 GL5 that goes in the back of these. It takes about 2.5 quarts. So I just have to top this off. I have changed the gear oil in this recently, which is something a lot of people neglect, but the gear oil in this probably has less than 300 miles on it. So that's it. That's the end of the video. Hopefully that helps you have the courage to go through this, or just do it yourself. Maybe it saves you a penny or two, but don't be afraid to work on your vehicle. Look forward to some more videos that we'll probably do on simple maintenance like this. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up.